Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is MTG Ghoul Dude, and today we're going to be continuing our Digging Up the Past of Different Tribe series, Plants. If you're new to the channel, Digging Up the Past is a series that I started with a long time ago with zombies, and I've continued to hit a lot of mini-series with different smaller tribes, and then I've also done dragons in a bigger series, in its own little standout series. So, if you're interested in seeing a creature type, let me know down in the comments below and we'll try and get that one started for you. But today we're going to continue and finish off with plants. Excuse me. It's a little early morning for me. So let's go on ahead and get into the garden, shall we? Starting off with Centaur Vinecrasher for 3 and a green. This is a 1/1 plant Centaur with trample. When it enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of lands in all graveyards, which could be very powerful. Whenever a land card is put into a graveyard from anywhere, you may pay 2 green. If you do, return it from your graveyard to your hand. I could see this if you're playing like Creatures Matter with plants, like if plants coming back has a thing for you. I could see it. Tree of Perdition. Now, if you watched the last episode, you'll know that I really enjoyed the Tree of Redemption art, but this one is a little bit more. It's up there on the crazy side, because if you look at the art, you start seeing that the tree is now hanging zombies, and that the Hell Vault is exploded. It's done. They've done. Nahiri's did what she wanted to do, and she accidentally let Avacyn free. But for 3 and a black, it's a 0/13 from Eldritch Moon. It's a defender, and you can tap, exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness. Bloodbriar from the same set for 2 and a green. This is a 2/3. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Excuse me. Which for any black deck that wants to deal with counters and you're splashing green for it, this is another good card, especially if you're moving the counters around. Born Willow for 1 a black and a green. This is a 3/2 with haste. Surprisingly, it's a plant skeleton, and it also has the Delirium ability. Whenever it enters the battlefield, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, creatures with power 2 or less can't block this turn. Which I could see some very swingy games that could be brought into light, especially if you have Skulk, so if they can't be blocked this turn, it's pretty good. Wall of Vines from M19 is for 1 single green. It's a 0/3 with Defender and Reach, and if you play this in a Arcades deck, this is just 1 and a green to draw a card and play a dude. Portcullis Vine, same thing pretty much. 1 green, it's a 0/3 with Defender. But for 2 and tap, you can sacrifice a creature with Defender and draw a card. So you can essentially draw multiple cards with this one. Grappling Sundew for 1 and a green. This is a 0/4, and this is from the Guilds of Ravnica set with Defender and Reach. For 4 and a green, it gains indestructible until end of turn, which is pretty wild. Bloom Hulk for 3 and a green. This is a 4/4 when it enters the battlefield. Proliferate from War of the Spark. I recently seen this in a Finn the Fangbearer deck, and they used it to proliferate a death touch counter on a creature and proliferate the amount of poison I had, which was very interesting to see that this card did. Lucian Caryatid for 1 and a green. This is a 1/1 from Theros Beyond Death. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. If you control a creature with 4 power or greater, you can add 2 mana of any one color instead. I play this in Philath because if I can put some counters on it, it becomes its own mana ability. It makes the mana better. Marassa Sproutling for 2 and a green. This is a 3/3 from Zendikar Rising. And it also has the ability Kicker for 1 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target card with Kicker from your graveyard to hand, which could be interesting. The art's kind of neat too. It's kind of a bunch of them kind of just sprouting up, like Baby Groot. Moss Pit Skeleton for a black and a green. This is a 2/2 plant skeleton with Kicker. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, if Moss Pit Skeleton is in your graveyard, you may put it on top of your library. Which, like I said, this is one of those, if you're in black and green and you want to do +1/+1 counters, this has the added benefit. Bayou Groff for 1 and a green. This is a 5/4 plant dog from Strixhaven. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you sacrifice a creature or you pay 3. Usually, whenever I play this in Phylath, I don't have any problem sacrificing one of my little plant tokens that I've done put out after Phylath has come down. This is usually just a stricter, better upgrade, in my opinion. Overgrown Arch for 1 and a green. This is 0/4 with Defender. You can tap to gain in life, or you can sacrifice it to learn for 2 mana. Glinting Creeper for 4 and a green. This is a 0/0 from Modern Horizons 2. When it enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So if you're putting this in a 5-color deck, this is a 10/10, I think. Enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it for each mana color. Yeah. White, blue, black, red, green. And then times 2, that's 10. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. That's interesting. I looked at this card, but I never thought it was that great. Now we're jumping ahead to Midnight Hunt with a Root Coil Creeper for a black and a blue. This is a 2/2 plant horror. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, or you can tap it to add 2 mana of any color, and you can only spend this mana to cast spells from your graveyard. But then you can pay a green and a blue, and you could tap it and exile it, return target card flashback you own from your hand to exile, which could be interesting. The Cultivator Colossus. For 4 and 3 green, it is a star from Crimson Vow. It has trample, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. But that's not really as important as its ability when it enters the battlefield. Because when it enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. And if you do, draw a card and do it again. Which, if you're playing Landfall, this is just amazing and could swing your turn so wild. And then if you're playing a Spelunking, all of those lands enter the battlefield untapped, which is pretty neat. And then we have a Saga. Boseiju reaches skyward on the front for 3 and a green. You can go through the Saga, and when you finally get to add the 3rd lore counter, it flips over into Branch of Boseiju. And I've played this a lot, and I really enjoy playing this because the benefits of not getting a creature, or the cons of not getting a creature as soon as you cast it, is not as bad as whenever you finally get to flip it over. And it's huge. So, Rampant Rejuvenator for 3 and a green. This is a 0/0 plant hydra from the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Commander deck. Enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. When it dies, search your library for up to X basic land cards where X is Rampant Rejuvenator's power. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This does work in Phylath because this is already a plant. And then, okay, so you play a land, you put 4 counters on it, so that's 6. Then if you're able to like double land, if you like play a Fabled Passage, you get the 4 from the first one and the 4 from the next one. That's wild. And if you can sacrifice it, or you have to, like, it's destroyed, I mean, that you win either way, because you got them to point the removal somewhere else, and then if it died, you get to search for 10 lands. This can swing your landfall very wildly if you can get it up there. Genesis Hydra for X and a 2 green. It's a 0/0. When you cast a spell, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent card with a value X or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle the rest into your library. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. Topiary Stomper. And this one is for, oh man, I grabbed the Planeswalker stamp art from Nuka Pano. But for 1 and 2 green, it's a 4/4 plant dinosaur, which was wild. It has vigilance, and whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, and shuffle. You can't attack or block unless you control 7 or more lands. This one, surprisingly enough, is a popular creature for standard, and this is a standard all-star, I think it is, because I've seen a bunch of decks play this. I think the Nissa deck, the Nissa Resurgent Animus is playing this, which is pretty wild to me, because at first it was just a do nothing card, and now it's seeing play in a standard deck. Floriferous Vine Wall for 1 and a green. This is a 0/2 plant wall from Dominaria United. It has Defender. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Good card selection if you can keep it. Good little body too. Brayer Hydra. For 5 and a green, this is a 6/6 with Trample, Plant Hydra, with a Domain. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can put X +1/+1 counters on a target creature you control, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Even if you're playing this in a green and black plant deck, like I am Phylath, if you wanted to add this, one of the key cards you would be looking for the most is your Chromatic Lantern and the Dryad of Elysian Groves. There we go. I had to think about it for a second, because then it makes all your lands all your land types. So it would always get 5 +1/+1 counters, which is pretty wild. Now we're going to jump a little ahead into the Wilds of Eldraine with the Beanstalk Worm for 4 and a green. This is a 5/4 plant worm with reach, but it also has an adventure to plant beans for 1 and a green. It's a sorcery. You may play an additional land this turn. I actually like this one. I like the art. It looks kind of derpy, but it looks great nonetheless. I really like it. And the play an extra land ability on a flip side of a 5/4 is still pretty good too. Topiary Panther for 4 and 2 green from Murders of Markov Manor. Karlov Manor. I don't know. All them sets were ran together a little too fast for me, if you want to know my opinion. It's a 6/5 plant cat with trample, but also has basic land cycling. And I got this in foil, and it was just the cutest thing. Vengeful Creeper for 4 and a green. This is a 5/5 plant elemental with disguise, 5 and a green. Whenever it is turned face up, destroy target artifact or enchantment in opponent controls. Flourishing Bloomkin for 1 and a green. This is a 0/0. It gets +1/+1 for each force you control. But it's not a star. Why is it not a star? Disguise for 4 and a green. Whenever it is turned face up, search your library for up to 2 force cards. Reveal them, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. Oh, one onto the battlefield and one into the other into your hand. I'm surprising it's not. Oh well, it is. It gets +1/+1. Okay. Tangle Grove kelp, one of the few other blue plants that we see in our wonderful ecosystem of planty boys. For 5 and 2 blue, this is a 6/6 with Ward 2. It is a clue plant in the Murders of Karlov Manor commander deck. At the beginning of each combat, other clues you control become 6/6 plant creatures in addition to the other types. That's wild. So if you're building a big clue deck with plants, that could be pretty wild. For 2, you can sacrifice it and draw a card. I don't know if I would agree with sacrificing it if it does that much. That's a pretty balling card. And now we move into Thunder Junction with the Prickly Pear for 2 and a red. This is a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token. With tap, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Activate this only as a sorcery. Bristleback Sentry for 1 and a green. This is a 3/3 plant wolf with Defender. As long as you control a creature of power 4 or greater, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. Which, like I said, if you're playing like Philath, it's a plant. Play a land with Philath in play. You make this a greater than a 4/4, really, because it gets 4 counters. It turns it into a 7/7. Then it no longer has Defender, it can attack. Pretty wild. Tarantula. Yeah. For 4 and 2 green, this is a 6/5 plant spider. Ugh. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each if you control a desert. So it's a 5 mana, 6/5 plant spider with reach. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. That's pretty neat. The Hard Bristle Bandit for 1 and a green. This is a 1/1. You can tap for 1 mana. And whenever you commit a crime, you can untap that bandit. But it only happens once each turn. Oh, it's my boy, the Aloe Alchemist, the KY Conjurer. I have so many nicknames for this card. I love the flavor. No, never mind. No, I'm not gonna get into that. For 1 and a green, this is a 3/2 plant warlock with trample. When it becomes plotted, target creature gets +3/+2 and gains trample to end a turn. Raucous Entertainer for 1 and a green. This is a 2/2 plant bard. And I'm a meh on the bard thing. The creature type bard. But that's from the D&D set, and it doesn't seem to hurt, so I'm not too upset about it. But I added this into Philath because if you have an extra mana with this on the board, before your land drop, you can play your Philath, tap a mana into this. All your plants get +1/+1, so they become 1/2s right at the gate. Pretty good. And Philath becomes a 6/6. So because for one generic mana, you can tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that entered the battlefield this turn. It's pretty wild. Then we get into the plant, the myth, the legend, Bristly Bill the Spinesower. For 1 and a green, this is a 2/2 plant legendary creature, plant druid. And it has the landfall ability. Whenever it enters the battlefield under control, whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And for 3 and 2 green, you can double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. I still have yet to be able to get a Bristly Bill for Philath, and I'm trying to find one. Cactus Folk Sure Shot for 2 and a red and a green. This is a 4/4 with Plant Mercenary with Reach. In Ward 2, at the beginning of combat on your turn, other creatures you control power 4 or greater gain Trample and Haste until end of turn. Which, if you have this on the battlefield before Philath comes down, Philath just gains Trample and Haste. Dune Chanter from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander deck. For 2 and a green, this is a 2/3 plant druid. This one's a little wild looking. It has reach, and lands you control and lands cards you own that aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to their other types. Lands you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color, and tap, and it has its own ability. Tap to mill 2 cards, you gain 1 life for each land card milled this way. Rumbleweed for 10 and a green. This is an 8/8 plant elemental. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard. And it has vigilance, reach, and trample. When it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample to their turn. Huh. Didn't know that was a thing. I might have to look for this one too. Kiri Talented Sprout for 1, and Naya, which is red, green, and white. This is a 0/3 legendary creature plant druid. Other plants and tree folk you control get +2/+0. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, return target plant, tree folk, and or land card from your graveyard to your hand, which could be very useful in a land-centric strategy. And finally, we come to our last little bud, Bristlebud Farmer for 2 and 2 green. This is a 5/5 plant druid with trample, and it enters the battlefield. You create 2 food tokens. Whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice a food. If you do, you mill 3 cards. You may put a permanent card from among them into your hand. I could see this one being in a token, like artifact token build. It'd be pretty good. The art is kind of different though. I'm trying to figure out what his art is supposed to represent. But that is going to be it for today, everybody. I really appreciate everybody that watches the videos. If you watch this long and you're not subscribed, what are you doing? But like I said, if you have any suggestions for another new mini series to start on, let me know down in the comments below. But that's going to be it for me. I really appreciate everybody that likes and comments on the videos. I couldn't do it and be where I am now without you guys. So I'll see you guys next time in the graveyard.